Hi guys, it's Peter at Peter's Blooms. I'm here in South Florida in mid-February and temperatures are already in the mid-80s and it's only going to go up from here. We have a lot of orchids that are in bloom, but we have a few that didn't spike this year and it's time to repot. So we have our tools, we have our media, we have our pots, and we have our orchids that need to be repotted. So let's get started. So first off, let's see what we're dealing with. So all of these are bifoliate Cattleyas. I don't have the IDs on any of them. I think they're either white or yellow. And these two were part of a division we did last year where the original plant is in another pot, but these were split. They look quite healthy, but essentially they have no media, so they definitely need to be repotted. There's no new spikes, but there is new growth and there's roots that are maybe half an inch long, so it's a good time to repot them. So those are those two. And again, the pseudobulbs look really healthy. This one is way overgrown the pot. The media is still some media, but not too much. It's even hard to see where the new growth is. But it's just all over the place. And this one, maybe the same plant, but also we didn't really pay much attention to these last year. And this has not too much media. I think there's some new growth. That definitely needs to be set up a little better. And then finally this one, the plant looks pretty good, but obviously growing out of the pot. Has a new growth with maybe quarter or half an inch long roots. So in general, you want to plant these when the roots are not too long, but are there so that they can set down into the new media. I think there's a whole chart of different Cattleyas in terms of when to repot them. Some of them before they bloom, some of them after. But since I don't know what kind of plants these are, we're just going to do them all now before the temperatures get too high and you get stuck in the middle of summer or something like that where it's raining all the time and the plants might be set back if you repot them at that point. So that's that part. Let's go on to what we're going to do with them. So essentially my plan is to plant them into these plastic pots with a lot of holes for aeration and then put these into the terracotta pots. We do move the plants around quite a lot and I don't want them to root into the terracotta pot necessarily. In some cases we bring them inside if there's a windstorm coming. So I'm going to try to see if they do well in these plastic pots. And I got this on Amazon. They're actually a little too tall, so I cut around the top so they would fit into the terracotta pots. And then we'll hang these probably over in our bougainvilleas so they get partial sun with these hangers. So that's the plan. In terms of the media, I'm thinking of two different medias. One is with lava rocks and charcoal. I've seen online that people do pretty well with that here in South Florida. And the other is a bark-based media that'll have charcoal and either some rocks or perlite, and maybe some peat moss as well. And then possibly I saw online that some growers use rubber chips instead of rocks. Maybe it captures less of the fertilizers so the plants don't get burned. So we further discussed what to do, and the thought was to repot this one in this 1 gallon plant pot, garden pot, so that we can then put that into another ceramic pot for display on the ground. So it turns out that this is actually just one plant with one root system, and that this other one was actually four different plants when it was repotted last year. So we'll split this one into 2 smaller pots, keep that one as the larger pot, probably do that one with the lava rocks and one of the 2 of these with the lava rocks, and the other one with the bark mix. So this is the lava rock that I got from Home Depot. You can see it's all different sizes. I've been washing it because it does seem to, as you wash it, some of the redness of it washes off. You see some of them are white now. I don't know if that's some kind of dye or some kind of red sand that they cut it with, but I don't really want those that makes dripping red dye around, or having the orchids exposed to those, whatever that material is. So I'll keep washing it until it's clear, the water is clear, and then I'll separate the larger stones from the smaller ones. I may put the larger ones in the bottom of the pot. Sometimes people use styrofoam, but the pots tend to get top heavy with the orchids, so I think the stones might be a better idea. Of course, they'll provide good drainage, but that's kind of what I plan to do, is to use these fairly large stones in the bottom and then do a mix of the smaller stones with charcoal. I don't have a recipe of this, but I'll try to make sure I have enough for the 1 gallon plus at least 2 of the smaller pots. So I'll continue washing this and then try to sort it out. Okay, so I continued to wash it for about another 5 minutes, and it still was leaching some of the red dye or sand. And you can see the consistency. Some of them are kind of whitish, some of them are black. There's even one that's a different kind of stone. So I think it's going to be okay. I don't think there's a lot of material left. And what I'll do is measure out. So we want to be able to plant an orchid in that size pot, so I'll measure out approximately that amount less what I think the roots are, and then maybe 2 or 3 of that size, and then maybe split what I have for the charcoal in 2. So we'll see what that ratio comes out. I heard that this works well for South Florida. I know the nurseries don't really like it because it seems to retain salt from the fertilizers and can burn the plants. But here in South Florida, if you have your plants outside, here where it rains 60 inches or more a year, I guess that's not a problem with this media retaining salt. And it is, the rocks obviously are inorganic, so unlike bark, you don't get breakdown of the rocks. So we'll see how this goes. People do report success with this for Cattleyas. So let me measure this out and see how much we end up with. Oh, I did separate out the larger stones, so I won't include those in the mix. And we'll, as I mentioned, just put them in the bottom of the pots. Okay, so I separated out the lava rocks. That should be enough for the 2 smaller orchids, and then the larger one that we want to put in there. Those are the big rocks. And then I bought this charcoal. It's horticultural grade. I don't know the recipe, but it gave enough for essentially two pots full of this material, and the back says to do the 4-to-1 mix. So I think that's going to be enough if I use one of those for this material and then another one for the bark material. I'm not that familiar with the different grades of charcoal. This does say horticultural charcoal, but whether you can use like a lump charcoal that would be normally used for barbecue, maybe that's a possibility. If anyone has an idea, leave some comments and I'll try it out next time. That's certainly the bulk charcoal for barbecuing. I'm not talking about the briquettes that are, formed and probably would dissolve, and not the ones that have any kind of fuel in them to help them to light, but essentially wood that are turned into charcoal, which are fairly common around here for barbecuing. Maybe those would work, and that's much more economical than buying this horticultural grade material. So if that's the case, next time I'll try to do that. Let me go ahead and mix this stuff up with a rock, and then we can prepare the other media. Okay, for the bark-based media, I'm going to use this bark. It says it's good for Cattleyas. It's, again, all this stuff is from Home Depot. You can get a custom mix from a lot of nurseries, but I'm just going with this. So I'll use 3 of that. I did see a video from somebody, a grower in Hawaii, where of course they have a lot of rain, and he used these rubber chips. So I bought this. This is kind of like the playground stuff. They have it in brown and red. I bought the brown. So this is what it looks like. And basically, it's to not use so much organic material in the mix, but not have a lot of rocks, and essentially try to keep the media from decaying so quickly. So we'll see how it goes. I think this actually smells like rubber from tires, so I'll be sure to rinse this well. I'm not sure what the plastics will do to the plant, but that's what the other grower suggested and what they use in Hawaii. And then of course I'll use the charcoal in that one container, and then a little bit of peat moss, and then some perlite, about 1x perlite. The peat moss, people say, is good for the fertilizer retention, so I'll use maybe half a container of that. So that's the plan. Let me mix it up. Oh, and by the way, the rock material looks like that. The charcoal is really much smaller than the rock, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, there's everything together. Let's see if this works. It seems like all the growers have their own custom mix, and of course it's built to their growing conditions, and if they're growing in a greenhouse, of course it's quite different than if you're growing outside. Here in Florida, at least these Cattleyas that I'm repotting, they grow like crazy. They don't always bloom, but these are very well adapted to our environment outside, and they're so big because they basically outgrow their pots in a short period of time. And the ones that I'm working with are probably divisions of divisions of divisions, so we've probably had them at least 5 years, maybe 10 years. All right, finish this part up and start cleaning up the plants. Okay, after all of that, I think we're actually ready to get started. This was the larger one that we're gonna put back into the 1 gallon pot. That's here. I'm gonna use this lava rock charcoal mix. I did cut some additional holes if we end up setting this down inside another decorative pot that could cover all these holes at the bottom. It'll at least give the roots some additional air. And then, so this was the one going into the lava rock, and then these were the other ones in the other pot. There's actually 4 of them, and those we'll put into these smaller baskets and then into these terracotta pots. And again, I have the bark mix here and the lava rock mix here. So let's get started. And so this has got a big root ball. I'm gonna move this other stuff off the table for now. And of course we start, I have this bin with some paper in the bottom, so I can change the paper between the plants. And of course you start by sterilizing your equipment. Let's get it. All right. And then try to figure out what part of this is growing. So there's new growth here. And basically cut away all of these old canes that are dried up. Some of them just fall off right off. And then go through and try to detangle the root ball, get rid of the dead roots. So it's actually pretty compact. As I said, this was in a pot last year with the rest of this, and then an additional piece that we have in a terracotta pot, and it was just packed in there. So there's a lot of things to come off. So this will likely take me another 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll return with the video once I have it cleaned up. Okay, so I finished cleaning up that larger one that's here. It still is a mess, but I worked and worked on it, and actually during the process broke off one of the newer growth, so I stopped at that point. I cleaned it up as best I could. It's basically like a giant hairball. And then the other ones where there were 4, they were relatively easy to clean up, so they're ready to go too. So let's start potting this group. Starting with this one. Put it in this pot. As I said, I cut some additional holes. I'll put some of these bigger rocks at the bottom. Just make sure there's good drainage. That's good. And then start putting this mix in. Let's see how this will go. So the growing parts, there's one over here and then another one on this side. So you want it to be a little bit below, and you want the growing side, the non-growing side, to be against the side of the pot. So I think I can fill in. It's probably a bit over potted, but as I said, these grow like crazy, so I'm not that concerned about that. It's mainly that the roots, that it doesn't dry out. And it may, with this kind of lava media, it may dry out more quickly, but again, we have a lot of rain here in the summer, so I'm not all that concerned about it drying out. And of course, we'll know if it's raining here, obviously. Maybe it typically rains every afternoon or every other afternoon, so it's not like they don't get a lot of rain in addition to the water and fertilizer that we give them. I think that's looking okay with the height. And I'm just going to pour this in loosely. Hopefully not all over the place, but to pick it up. Okay. I probably could wear gloves. This is kind of rough, but not that bad. And I do want to save enough for the other plants. Okay. Put more around where the active area is. Okay, so that's not too bad. So I'm not going to water it. I mean, these are fairly wet. I'm not going to water it for a few days just to make sure everything that got cut seals up. Okay, that's that one. And now for these other. Oh. For this one, let's see if I can figure out which ones to put in. I basically tried to get the ones of the same size. So these are about the same size. The active part of this one is over here, and the active part of this one. So I kind of, maybe I'll point them in the opposite direction, so that when the blooms happen, you know, assuming the blooms happen next year or maybe this year, they'll spread out a bit. And again, get some of these. In this case, it's mainly to help to weigh this down a bit, because if we move it around, I don't want it to fall over all the time. All right. So that should be all right. Maybe again, it's a bit over. Maybe in this case, it's a bit too much. So I wanted to make sure it had 4 pseudobulbs. I mean, some people get away with 3, but I wasn't quite sure if this is growing on two areas, it kind of looks like it is, and this on one. So you can try to preserve the ones that are likely to bloom. And this I'll also use the rock. Use less stones in the bottom. And this one I actually probably should just use the smaller rocks, because the big ones won't fit that well. So but that looks like it's going along pretty well. And these rocks are kind of like rocks coated with charcoal dust, kind of. But that's pretty well set, actually. A little bit more on the top. You know, when the new pseudobulbs grow, sometimes they step up from the previous ones, so we'll see how that goes. So that looks pretty good. Enough of this rock. And then this was the bark mix, so actually it also is a fairly more compact mix. So I didn't put that much peat moss, maybe half of the other ones, but it does feel much more compact than the rock, of course. So this one was going in this spot. Put a few right at the bottom. Okay. So I believe these two are the new growth on this one, and that has five pseudobulbs. This has 4, and the new growth is here, although it doesn't look that good. I should have cut this off. Yeah. So you can cut off the old flower spikes. So it's encouraging. It has had 3 spikes, so it's maybe likely to be the blooming, one of the blooming areas of the plant when it was blooming. Okay, so this is, let me put this in the bottom first. Yeah, I have a lot of this mix actually. May need to put a stake in this one so it doesn't fall over. All right, a little bit unstable. So I'll put a stake in it, maybe tie it. Until the roots get established. So that's the first set, and I don't think I'll tape I won't tape all the cleaning of the second set, but it's more or less the same. And then I'll come back when everything is cleaned up, and then we'll repot those. So I'm in the process of cleaning the other ones. This one actually, again, had multiple plants in it. This one has 5 with 1 new growth, and this one only 2, so I'll have to see if this one can recover. And then this other one, it's kind of like the first one. It's all matted together. So kind of orchid abuse, I guess, but somehow got stuck in the back. You can just see it's all massive roots, and some dead pseudobulbs. I have to identify where the new growth is, so it's over here, and maybe over here. Try to get rid of the rest of it, but it's, again, quite a process when it's got this giant root ball. And actually very little media, so these are kind of bare root at this point. So we'll go through it. And then finally I have the one in the pot. It's just growing over, so maybe I'll keep this in this pot and not put it in the plastic pot and just try to clean it up. I'll have to see. But continue to do the cleanup, and I'll just do all of this and then come back when it's time to repot. Okay, I'm back. I ended up splitting this one that was way overgrown into two. And then I have this one, which has the two separate groups with one with only two. So I'll end up having to repot this one some other time. I think it's okay the way it is, but I'll try to do that within the next week or so. So let's start with these. So I think with this one, I'll do the bark media. See how that one goes. These all may be the same orchid. You just didn't really keep track of them, and since they didn't bloom this year, I'm not sure. Fill that in. So because this one is relatively small, I'm just putting it in the center. I'm not sure which side will grow. But try to stuff it in together. Put it like that. Looks all right. This one was just going everywhere. So some of them I cut off that were even face down. So it's a little bit trickier. Maybe this one I'll do the bark too, and the other one the lava rocks. Or maybe this one has. Yeah, let me do it that way. Just focus on the bark. Though it still has a lot of roots. Probably some of these could go. Just get it now. Again, these were kind of matted. But it is growing here. Yeah, I think that's the main area where it's growing, but there is additional growth down here, so it's probably could cut off some of these other pseudobulbs with no leaves, but we'll see. And these grow so fast, I probably have to repot it next year. For sure. And this one, again, this one is, I try to, since they're so oddly shaped, this one's going to keep growing this way, so I probably could have gone to a bigger pot, but this is the biggest one I bought. All right, let's see. So this is where it's growing next, but try to get it together. You just do your best, right? And this one also oddly shaped, as they often are. This one go with the rock. Let's grab some of this additional stuff. So it's growing there and over here. So I'm gonna try to keep that area, have some space. And try to use the small rocks, not crowd it too much. have enough rocks for another orchid, and enough of the other media too. So. Too good for the fingernails. Don't want to break the new growth. All right. Here, and I'll be right back with another pot. Okay, so this is what we ended up with, and we still have one to do. But we'll keep a better control of these this year, give them fertilizer, make sure they're happy, and hopefully if they bloom twice a year, hopefully they bloom later this year, or for sure next spring. So here are the final repotted orchids. We have 5 of them in the smaller pots. I put them on these hangers. In some cases I had to stabilize the plants with some string or twine and a stick, but mainly because there were multiple plants in there and they started moving around. So I want to make sure that they establish before I take that off. And I had to adjust, in some cases, the depth of the plants. It's a little bit tricky to get the rhizome on the very top of the bark or media when these plants have been overgrowing and out of the pot. The rhizomes are not exactly straight in a line the way they would be in a nursery. So they're all hanging there. That's about the same area that they were growing before, next to a neighbor that's in full bloom, and then this is the one that I need to repot, but ran out of additional pots to do that. So I'll get some additional materials to repot that. And then the bigger one is down there. And again, in that 1 gallon pot, and we'll put a decorative pot around it. And hopefully they all do well. We'll keep an eye on them more diligently and make sure to fertilize them and see if they bloom in the coming season. Well, thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to subscribe. We'll have additional projects coming up, including repotting some abused Phalaenopsis orchids, as well as mounting some on our trees. See you later. So just a quick update. It's been a couple weeks since I repotted them. I'll just give you some status update because I always like to see that after these videos. Of course, not too much is happening except new roots are elongating and starting to head into the media. I see this on this big one as well as some of the other ones, although I'm not really going to disturb them, otherwise it will move them around and might affect the new roots. So I'll be back with more updates in a different video, especially if these start to flower. See ya.